Good morning. My name is Chris Adam with Youth Pledge for Employers, and I'm delighted to be joined by Charlie from iFilm. Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for giving up your time to speak to me this morning. So, I guess my sort of starter for 10 questions has to be: can you please tell me about iFilm and what it is you do?
Yeah, iFilm is an independent production company. We're based in Norwich. The company turns 50 years old this year, so it's one of the oldest independent production companies in the country. And we produce video and film content. So we produce everything from a 30-second advert through to a 90-minute film. We in particular we're looking to develop more of our documentary side of things. So we're making some documentaries, got a documentary for BBC One at the moment. But areas of interest are in education, in science, environment, technology, and in arts and culture.
That's amazing. And when I ask people to sort of sum up what their business does and stuff, there's a lot for me to dissect in that opening statement. That's brilliant. And just to give me a sort of summary of to facilitate all of those different things you said there and all of those different, as I say, areas where you have aims as well and specialisms, sort of what kind of roles do you have within the organizations to facilitate all of that?
So within the company, I spend a lot of my time producing content, but actually also trying to develop new ideas and find new business. So actually a lot of the new business side of things is what I do. And so it's quite different if you're trying to get new business in television, because you're actually trying to come up and pitch ideas to broadcasters. Sometimes we do have ideas where we don't have a broadcaster initially buy in, and so we actually either get it funded separately or we actually go ahead and make it and then try and sell it afterwards. It's a bit of a risky strategy and not sort of something that I would recommend for a lot of the clients that we actually work with and the businesses that we do. So as I said, we work in education, so we work a lot with schools, independent schools, and not we've looked at British schools, but British schools internationally as well, so we've worked across the world. And then I have Elena, who works with me, who does the business development as well. So a lot of her time is spent in looking at developing the sectors that we're in, making contacts and taking the ideas through. We have a head of production who actually oversees our schedule and planning, and that's critical to kind of what we're trying to do, because there is a lot, and we're not a big team. There's 8 of us in total, so we're trying to make sure that we can stay on schedule, which is usually a bit of a struggle at times, particularly when it gets very busy. But what I would say is a lot of these jobs are multi-skilled. So our head of production actually also production manages, produces, sometimes films, sometimes edits, which is one of the struggles that you do have in the business. And really, we're trying to make sure that they don't do quite as many jobs as they do. And part of the struggle is also sometimes when you're relatively new into it, you want to do lots and lots of different roles. And actually, we're trying to make sure that we see the strengths of people and try and hone and make sure that that's the direction they want to go in. We have a creative director who's also a director, a cameraman, and an editor, and will help very much with ideas and concepts. So when we're trying to brainstorm and develop ideas, including some of our own ideas as well, so he's very involved in that. But currently he's locked in an edit suite editing the BBC One documentary that we're doing. We have another editor, cameraman, DOP, that's director of photography, Andy, who's working on a number of different projects simultaneously again, and he will develop them from the initial sort of almost like once we have the jobs in to actually how we're going to do it, how we're going to film it, planning all the shots, and then editing the projects together. He also runs part of our training side of things, because we actually train people, both businesses and individuals and schools, in how to create their own content. We have an editor. Well, we have 2 editors, an editor and an animator editor. So they are sort of more often than not dedicated into being in the edit suite. We try and make sure that they don't go out on filming too often, not that we don't want them to, but just again, we need to get through the edits. And there's almost, I would say, a ratio of anywhere between 1 to 3 or 1 to 2 in editing versus filming time. So if you spent a day filming, you're probably spending 2 days editing. So if you spent 2 days, that's sort of 6 days. So it's very odd, well, up to 4 to 6 days. So you do need to make sure you have people dedicated in the editing side of things. And then we have someone who also does our HR and also our bookkeeping.
I mean, amazing. Thank you for sort of giving that breakdown of the structure. I never noticed sort of these. I mean, you've given a breakdown and a great explanation of all the different roles. And I want to go back to the point you made actually about sort of as you say, the different hats that people have to wear within the organization, sort of fast paced, deadline driven, and sort of speaking as someone who, as to say, who doesn't have experience or knowledge of the sector, you've sort of said there that you like your your staff to sort of have a particular focus if possible, but as you say, they have to do different roles as well. Sort of how typical of that of the sector, and if someone was going to go into iFilm or sort of similar organization, how much do they need to be prepared, as I say, to do these different roles, or is it one where they could actually go to an organization and do just very specifically editing or camera work or another area?
It really does depend on the size of the company and the type of content that you're producing. So there's definitely companies where you would go in as an editor or an animator or a camera operator, and that would be your dedicated job, because we do work with freelancers, and we're trying to develop the freelance team that we're working with as well, because it's in order to be able to deliver the content that we need. Sometimes it's more efficient to actually have a dedicated camera operator to come in and actually film something and it gets passed across into our editing team, rather than having someone who's going to be involved in every step of the process. Because once, for example, Cameron, who is our creative director, is involved in a BBC documentary, I have to kind of keep him away from everything else that's going on as much as possible, so that there's the real focus time, because you do need to focus very much when to be able to deliver, particularly documentaries which are hour long series, etc. So what you will find is a lot of people are multi-skilled, particularly, I would say, almost at the early stages of their career, because when you're learning about it, you might learn about how to film, how you might edit, how you might production manage and schedule things. But as it becomes, I think, a better skill if you actually know what your greatest strengths are. There are some brilliant all-rounders, and there are lots of small companies, I would say, in the east of England where there are maybe 2 or 3 people in the company, and they do everything between those 2 or 3 people. And sometimes they actually struggle to bring in or work with bigger teams because they want to be involved in every single aspect. What I'd like to do is have teams that sort of like, you can actually sort of say, okay, well, you're going to focus on that. And again, as I sort of said, between the filming and the editing stage, the filming stage is actually quite often the quicker stage, and then it goes into an edit, and it takes a period of time to actually be able to develop those kind of ideas, particularly because we do a lot in documentary style, where you're not working to a drama script, you're not working to a script that sort of says people's going to say this. It's looser than that. It's not sort of so defined when you're actually producing the content. So I'm trying to remember what you asked the question in the first case. So I think in terms of the actual, I would say for a lot of young people going into the industry, understanding the different roles is really important. But I think there's also, I would say, within the education sector, sort of perhaps when you're being taught about filmmaking, there is an expectation from university students and that they actually finish their degree and they're already a producer, production manager, a DOP, an editor. Our industry is not like that. It's in reality, if you go into a business that's been running for a period of time, you won't go in as an editor, you won't go in as a production manager, you won't go in as a producer. Those roles are people who have got experience in the industry. You can shoot up the ladder very, very fast, and there is some brilliant sort of talent, and people do set up their own companies and do it that way as well. But just manage expectations. It's so much better to be able to work with people who've had experience and learn sometimes just by watching and getting involved in production. So there's an awful lot of watching, seeing what you can do to get involved in productions, and then learning. So say, okay, if I do that, that will really help them. And we very much see that when we're working with young people or runners or people who come into the industry and really want to learn. There's a lot of soft skills needed. There's a lot of communication skills that's needed. And one of the things that where people are so used to spending their whole time communicating to each other on a phone, actually, we need to talk to each other. We need to be able to communicate very clearly. And if things are not going right, and they're not sort of like, one of the things that we're so used to is part of the way through the day, something changes and you have to move and you have to know how to deal with problems. And it's problem solving. That's kind of what a producer's role is like suddenly, oh, we thought we could go there, but that's actually shut. What are we going to do? How can we actually make those decisions? Rather than throw up your hands and they go, well, we can't do it. It's like you have to find solutions very quickly. And that's kind of skills that come with sort of experience, but it's also understanding how to deal with pressure without it overloading you.
I mean, what I love about the response you gave there is, one, you've actually covered my next two questions in the answers you just gave there, which was fantastic. And I appreciate the honest and open insight into the industry as well, as you say, where people might think, as I say, if they go to the relevant university, do the relevant course, they may come out and they'll think they're going to be here. But as I say, sort of, from, as you say, from experiences, if you say, actually, as I say, yeah, you come in at this point and be prepared to, as you say, to bear that in mind. And what I wanted to ask alongside that is sort of, if you've got, say, maybe a sort of 16-year-old who's interested in going to the sector, and they plan to go to university, and they will probably be getting advice from their teachers and tutors about certain things they should be doing in their spare time, building up a portfolio, projects they should be involved with. From your side of things, for someone who, as I say, sort of will get applications from people and they sort of been through the journey themselves, what kind of things should they be doing in their spare time? What kind of projects, what kind of things should be in a portfolio, if a portfolio should what they have, what should they be doing to sort of really benefit their chances when they actually finish their their formal education in film?
Okay, so I think when you're sort of around about 16, there's the work experience weeks that you get sort of like you've got to do at school. Actually, for small companies like us, that's really difficult, because taking someone in for a week when you're in a small team, and actually we don't want to do it just, sit in a corner and just make us cups of coffee, and because that doesn't really help anyone. You don't feel particularly engaged with what's going on. So we don't do it very often, and we have to have a very clear picture of why that person's coming to us, and we've got a job for them to actually work on. So I think one of the things is, when you are at that age and you're trying to get experience, because in truth the more experience you get, the more chances you get to get involved with productions and see work happening, the better. But it's not easy. It really isn't easy to get those opportunities. So if you cannot, or you can't find the right companies, or you can't sort of get in there, then what I would suggest is, everyone now is a filmmaker. Let's face it. You've probably got a phone. You've actually seen lots of productions and everything else like that. There's nothing stopping you being able to use free software and being able to film and edit. I've seen some brilliant stop motion animation that's been done with Lego, that was done by 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds. I've seen, again, young, well, certainly sort of like of school age kids having YouTube channels, which have got thousands, if not tens of thousands of actually viewers and watchers. If you're producing content that is engaging or getting an audience, that straight away to someone like me makes me go, okay, what have you done? How have you done that? What was interesting? It may be not something that I would want to make myself, but I really do appreciate that someone's done it themselves and gone off and tried to sort of, or they've gone off with a group and they've tried to put things together. It doesn't mean that I will think, I've seen some not very good films that have been done, but actually they've gone off and done that. And I think that's there is an attitude that you have to really have it within this industry, and I think it's probably within the current world, is resilience is really, really important. And in truth, sort of like, a lot of people are not that used to rejection. I get rejected most days of the week from people when we're pitching ideas, when we're coming up with sort of like trying to tender for new work and everything else like that. And you have to sort of go, okay, that's a real shame, because I really wanted to work on that project. Or how am I going to move on? What have I learned from actually the rejection that's happened in what we're trying to do? So I think that's the kind of thing. So if you are going to try and get work experience or get work placements or get involved in films, one of which, know what's going on, find out what's going on. Don't get your parents to write for you to the companies, because if I get a company from, my son is really interested in stuff like that, that's great, but you're not writing. You're not your son. You're just trying to help your son out. And I'm a parent and I know exactly what that's like. But in truth, you need to have to hear from the person itself. Some of the best letters we ever had. We did have a 15-year-old who came and worked on a children's drama series. And at that stage, I said I wasn't going to take anyone of that age. But they were so good and they were so persuasive. And I got their parents in, and in front of their parents, they explained why they wanted to do it. And they got involved in 2 different productions that we were doing.
Oh, wow.
And became very involved, and then has gone on to the industry and everything else like that. So you can have, you've got to find a way to make it work and find the right company. And the other thing is, it's so easy now to look online and sort of find out who the local companies are. But if you're writing to everyone with the same email or the same sort of like, dear sir or madam, blah, 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 find out who it is that you should be talking to. Write to them personally. Make it about what this is really matters to you. It doesn't mean that we'd be able to respond positively, or as in we can respond positively. It doesn't mean that we can necessarily give you an opportunity, but actually it does make a difference. And I would say the majority of emails we receive from students and from young people get opened and get deleted because they have not actually spent a little bit of time thinking about who they're writing to and why they're writing to them and how we should actually respond to it. If you can't even be bothered to find out the name of the person that you're writing to, and if you spell the company name wrong, or you actually perhaps send a number of emails out and it's for a load of companies and you've got the company name wrong, instantly, I'm sorry, it's going in the bin.
I think you've provided loads of really useful, insightful bits there, and I think you actually sort of hit the nail on the head when you were talking about how, I say, I think a lot of people think because they've got access to the technology nowadays that they have the capacity to be a filmmaker, as you say, because sort of, we've all got it at our fingertips. But some of the traits you've tapped on there, as say resilience, ability to be able to sort of consider and do your research and advance and tailor and adapt sort of applications and things is really what I say, which will separate those people apart from, sort of everyone else. And it sort of leads me quite nicely onto my final question. And you sort of spoken a little bit about sort of maybe some of the things you've learned and some of your experiences. But if you could go back, Charlie, and speak to, say, sort of 17-year-old you, whether you'd like to or not, what is the one piece of sort of career advice you would give to your younger self based on the things you've learned?
I think probably, yeah, just I think I wish I'd understood business. That was never a skill I got and learned, and it was sort of something, and I still to this day, I know I'm not the best businessman. I've seen many of my contemporaries and other people with what I would consider not as good companies doing far better than our company has at times, and partly it's and partly because to run a business you there's lots of sort of like cliches, but you need to work on the business, not just in the business. And in truth, I still enjoy making content and being on set or out filming. And sometimes in order to develop the team and develop sort of like, as I was describing our team and the multiple different roles they have, that's a blessing and a curse, because actually it's really important that they have a very clear direction that they're going in. And we do as a company, we are reactive as well as proactive. We're proactive in terms of the areas that we're really interested in, but something comes along and suddenly our attention very quickly has to be spent in that particular time. So I think if I had understood business and a little bit more about how to develop and sort of like just how company structures and other things would have been really invaluable. And I don't think it's a skill that's really taught very often at school.